Hello and welcome to a frank conversation about race. I'm Peter Rubin. I'm here with Jamal Johnson.
Hi.
And we're friends and colleagues. We've been talking for, a couple of months now about all sorts of things, business and life and race. And we got to a point where it felt like there's something to share. We don't know exactly where this is going or what we're going to say, but we're here with the courage to get honest and get vulnerable and talk about an issue that's really up for the world right now. So with that, I'll say I'm Peter Rubin. I am a white European American man. And as you can see, and the work I do is business coaching. I help visionaries give birth to their businesses. And one of the values of the work I do is to talk about the taboos. So there's a way some of my colleagues teach business without looking at race, without looking at, inequity and inequality. And I think it's missing something. I really think conscious business means talking about this stuff. So I've been on my own personal journey, understanding what's going on, as a white man, what's my place and everything. So I'll share my story later. Jamal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jamal Johnson, and I'm a Black urbanite. My business is I'm a life coach, and I'm really concerned with identity, how people define themselves, and what I really try to do is give people the emotional space and the wherewithal to move forward. And just like Peter, that can't happen if you're not discussing the deeper issues, if you're not discussing race, gender, sex, class. It's really hard to really bring everything you need together for a success, and that could be in your relationships or in your work life or wherever else you want to make a difference. If you haven't really examined some of these things and have them aligned with what you're trying to do and who you want to be. And so right now in this period in America and also in Europe, these subjects are coming up again and again and again, and people are expressing, and I have to include myself in that, a lot of confusion around what to do with all this stuff, and even how to see the person next to them, how to see themselves as they get into discussions around this and really try to make it work.
Yeah, and a lot of fear.
Yeah,
lots of fear. Right, you look different. You're from a different country. You're Muslim. You're Mexican. Just the amount of fear in our national dialogue is immense right now. And I know for me, there's a mirror. Even as I want to say, like, oh, Trump supporters are crazy. They're not like me. They're separate. I'm a better white man than they are. There are places where I've had really, intense insights about, sorry, little technical glitch. We had to get our conversation outline back up. Anyway, I was just saying that I want to make other, less enlightened white people, others are different from me. And I've definitely been looking at my own fears and my own guilt and shame around race. So really our hope is that we're going to get real and get vulnerable in this call and talk about what's up for us and what we're seeing, and hopefully inspire you to take a deeper look. I mean, if you're watching this, you are taking a deeper look. So yeah, appreciate you being here. So Jamal, let's start by talking about like why do we discuss it? And maybe let's just go right in. Why don't you share what you were saying about being an altruism and how that is for you?
You're like, okay, yeah, let's start at the beginning. Well, no, I mean, that I've started to feel really frustrated with this conversation. I actually every month have a get together of like anywhere between like 9 and 14 people where we discuss race, and it's called the Frank Conversation About Race. And one of the things that tends to happen in those conversations, and I do it too, is that people have conversations about race so that they can tell you what the story is. and usually from white people, it's some version of the story is that I'm a good enough and kind enough person. Look at me talking to you people about this race thing. And that, and as black people, like, I notice that we accept that a lot. We're like, look, you're such a, beneficent white person to dare to deign to speak to me about this. And I find that it doesn't get a lot of work done. I find that everybody ends up still leaving the room confused about what to do and confused about how to make a difference. And I can't say I'm not confused, but what I'm sure is, as long as we make it about whether or not you treat, and I'll say you, like the general white person, treats people of color as humans, as long as we make that a matter of charity, then we aren't going to get very far. I don't know much, but I know that. Like, I'm very clear on
that. So I want to get more, like, ask you on a more visceral level, like when you're talking with a white guy who's obviously doing it, as a charity or, a company that talks about diversity because they have to check off a box.
Yeah.
How does that impact you as a black man?
I mean, for me, really personally, I can tell you that, like, I got scholarship to boarding school. And I went to one of the best boarding schools in the country. And I was often made to feel like I was a space monkey. Like they took me, put me in like a lab of white people, made me smart as like a favor, and then let me loose on the world. And great things were expected of me, and I owed everybody something. And that's a really shitty conversation. It's a really shitty conversation to have because you can't even begin. Like, I was smart well before those fuckers found me. And I'll be smart after. And my goals might not line up with theirs. And none of that stuff gets to be true. And it doesn't even get to be true to amongst black people quite often. Because the way that they end up seeing me is as a person who, again, was like taken off by the whites and made into something else. And it's funny because, like, I mean, the more I read about one of the things that people who vote for Trump are angry about, is the idea that liberals give up the idea of human agency. They give up on the idea that people can make a difference in their world. And as long as you treat the other as people you're doing a favor to, then you help them believe that, especially if you have power over them, that you're not that you're not acknowledging while you still are saying that you're doing them a favor.
Yeah.
As long as you do that, then you disempower yourself to actually learn about yourself, to actually figure out where you're coming from, and you also disempower the people that you're trying to help.
Yeah. And it's manipulative.
It's manipulative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a covert agreement, right? It's like there's a lot of assumptions in it that are really problematic. You're less than, I'm greater than.
Yeah.
You're uneducated, I'm educated. Right? Like the way I see the world is better.
Yeah.
And it's easy to think that when we have a white dominated world, and thinking in a white way can make you a lot more money. Right. But it doesn't take into question the system in the first place.
Well, that's the other thing that of course and that's the thing that you and I've discussed. Like, that system is hurting everyone, not just black people.
So let me talk about that then. So first of all, we're gonna fully own that, like, we're a black man and a white man talking. We're Peter and Jamal. I don't speak for all white men. He doesn't speak for all black men. And for the purposes of conversation, we will, in a way. Like, we will own that some part of our experience, like for me, is a white experience. Like, that's what I'm here listening for, is like what part of, my experience is a white experience. Because it all is, really. There's something holographic about it. Right? We can't speak for everyone, but it's all contained within us in this conversation somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I also just think that you know, you can reasonably say something based upon your experience, and and other people can reasonably disagree with me. That's
Yeah,
totally, but
totally.
I'm also not gonna like, if you disagree with me about some of these stances, I'm gonna want to see some proof.
All right.
I feel good about that.
All
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So I just had to say that for me, because I'm going to say, as you know, my experience as a white man is I didn't really have any interest in looking at social justice issues until about a year ago. Right, I'm 31, so I pretty much avoided the topic till I was 30 because, and not entirely, you know, I went to a couple workshops, but it wasn't like part of my life the way it is now. Um, and I think it's because it felt like a should, like I should talk about it. You know, I felt like reading the news was also a should for me. I didn't get why I'd want to. It felt painful and uncomfortable, and I didn't really know what my place was in the conversation. Um, and you know, I've been on a personal growth path for the last 6 years or so, more than that really, but intensely for 6 years, learning about pretty much looking at all the painful parts of my life that were unresolved. You know, I looked at my sexuality, I looked at intimacy, looking at my work and purpose, looking at business, and all of a sudden, after looking at all that, the next area of pain, like the next place to look at in me, is around privilege, right? Is around coming to grips with that. I grew up, you know, in Berkeley. I'm white. I'm male. My parents are educated. They paid for my college education, master's actually. You know, they paid for the whole thing. Um, and in many ways, I've been treated, you know, by our culture like the golden boy, like I have it all. And with that, like what I haven't wanted to admit is that there's a sense of entitlement. There's like a narcissism in me, and that's not all of who I am. People who know me know that there's more, but there is a deep current of entitlement. That's not my fault. It's actually how I've been conditioned, right? Because of how I've been raised and the culture we live in. Um, yeah, that's what showed up. And I realized that all of a sudden I realized like, oh, race isn't a people of color problem. It's that I feel really disconnected from most of humanity. I feel shame and grief for not looking at it. I feel afraid to walk around in parts of Oakland. Um, More than, you know, any immediate physical danger. Like I'm afraid of difference. You know, I'm afraid of people of color. I'm afraid of the judgment, you know, how I'm seen. There's just a whole world of pain in me. Um, so I started doing diversity work, like this sort of conversation from that place of like, oh no, there's something like to heal in me. Um, and really that's my main motivation, to be honest. Like I also like part of my life mission is love, and like how do I have loving connection with everyone, you know, including people of color. But it really starts with me, and like that's why I'm in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, and also you should know this. I mean, that's why I trust you, is because you at least admit that it's painful. I would say one of the things that happens. So there's two things that happen to me. One is that I'm like endlessly curious about what white people are thinking on this
Mm.
subject, and I never really get the truth because white people will always sort of dodge around it. And I say always, knowing that there is no always, and that's not what a white person does. And that's why we're talking. But what I mean is that so often it happens that the word always brings it to my head. And sometimes when these conversations get tough, I just watch white people just fade out. Just their eyes just slightly glaze over, and they just like go away. And I keep on wondering, like, why we as Black people even bother to discuss it if that's going to be the thing that we get, you know? Because for us, it's like, oh, this is our humanity and our lives, you know. And then we're having conversations with people for whom we're just being mildly impolite to bring it up at a cocktail party, you know, or we're kind of like just harshen their day a little bit. So they're just going to prefer not to hear us.
Yeah.
You know, it's like some sort of a weird sitcom where, like, you know, someone's at the table and he says, "Well, mom, I'm gay," and the mom's like, "Well, would you pass the butter?" Like, just not engaging.
Yeah.
With that thing. That's like,
Yeah.
personally a huge thing.
Mm.
And I would say that, like, I'm still sort of confused about why we as Black people bother. And in order to deal with some of that confusion for myself, I've started to figure out. I started to try to figure out what the most efficacious thing I can do on this subject, how I can actually be heard, how people could stop having their eyes glaze over when they talk to me, and that's been something I've been thinking about for Black people and for white people, because for Black people, what I've found is that we think we know all there is to know about race because we've been victimized, and I don't find that to be true either.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, what's been the most interesting thing is just to treat it like a to treat it like a conversation and like a construct, and to start chipping away at what it's doing to us. You know, like, I'm really clear that the extent to which I think about my finances, I think about my masculinity, that I try to protect myself or protect others, is all like the way I am sexually. A lot of that stuff is all like, I'm running the script of Jamal as Black guy, you know, and in many ways I love it and I don't mind it. You know, it feels good to take care of my friends, and it feels good to be pretty sure that something dangerous that was going to happen doesn't happen to me. But in other ways, it's completely constraining. And it's had me make decisions that have consequences. And it also, I mean, the next thing to say is that like I'm still working on my feminism. I'm still working on loving women the way, like, you know, taking away all blocks to me loving women completely.
Yeah.
And I know that that's another performed masculinity thing, and to some extent a performed piece of Blackness. And I know that it's like kind of disgusting even to me as I'm doing it sometimes. So, and I've had women explain things to me and my eyes have glazed over. And I just want to build some tools so that people don't have to do that, so that there can be some way that people can do a lot better of a job of actually of not letting their logic get in the way of good sense when it comes to looking at other people. Because, you know, everyone becomes captain of the debate team the second that they're challenged in this way. If they're not busy, you know, being asleep with their eyes open. And so, yeah, so that's been where I'm at. Yeah. And that's why I'm so eager to talk to people who can stand up to it enough to tell me what it costs them to be in their particular skin.
Yeah. The thing I heard most clearly about, like, what it costs you is that tape running Jamal as a Black man.
Yeah.
And there's some pride in that, like there's something you like that, and also it feels constraining for you.
Yeah.
I got to feel that a little bit. Yeah, the other part that stood out was when you're talking with a white person and their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
You know, like, please pass the butter. Tell me more about what that's like for you when that happens.
It's just degrading. It's like my humanity is such a threat to this person sitting in front of me, who I maybe think is a great person, that parts of their brain have to shut down like they're watching a fucking war crime, you know?
Mm.
Like my lived experience is such a piece of pain for you that you've got to go away in your head. Yeah. What is that? Like, you know?
And under the laughter, what's there?
Oh, I laugh because it's painful to me, and it hurts so bad, and it also is so absurd that you laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's actually one of the questions I have for you. Like when you mentioned privilege, I felt you like that felt like the most painful thing in the world to me when you said that. Like I could hear you go like it's like you were in a dark tunnel.
Mm.
And I'm like, what's going on? Like how is it having like two parents who were smart and love you and having some money in the bank and being able to afford some some nice clothing, like, you know?
Well, and on one hand, I'm not complaining.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean you're complaining. I just meant,
No, I just want to say like I'm not complaining about that. Like that, it's I mean, it's a huge blessing, and yeah, no, I'm not like, oh, I wish I didn't have privilege. Like I'm not running that, but it's not all good. Like there is a cost to it that I've been totally blind to my whole life, and then the cost is connection, right? And it's like the stories I made up about myself and needing to be perfect and exceptional in the world and be like different versions of it and be so generous, right? And be so like this. Yeah, like there's so much weight, responsibility on me as well. Like I got all this privilege, I can't squander it. And somehow in there, the arrogance of thinking I'm better, um, better or special or different, which hurts, I think hurts on like more of a spiritual level, just because it's not the truth. Like anytime we believe what's not true about us, we're hurting.
Yeah.
So,
You know what I
feel
heard?
that. Yeah.
I heard this idea of like being in charge, you know? Like what would it be like to have to be in charge all the time? And to sort of know that that's kind of bullshit, but have it be the way that you're supposed to be.
Yeah. I think as a white person and as a man, I've been culturally conditioned to be in control.
Yeah.
Right. Like to do well is to be in control, to have a strategy and execute on it. And yeah, I mean, I've been slowly unlearning. That's the workshop I'm in, is unlearning everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a master's in mechanical engineering. Right. It's all about how do you control every variable so the thing operates as expected.
Mm-hmm.
And from within that framework, like there's a lot of life that I missed out on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Coming out of that program, I had some pretty intense depression for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
in and out of it, because like there was no life left in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I wanted to say something also about, white people checking out and getting numb and disconnecting.
Yeah.
Like, I think I've built my capacity somewhat. Like, I don't check out as easily.
Yeah.
And still, like, in a mixed group talking about race, when people get angry, like, things get heated and intense, I'll definitely pop out. And it'll feel like I actually can't feel anything. Like, if someone, like a person of color often is sharing, like, an intense story,
Mm-hmm.
I'll know what I'm supposed to feel, like, supposed to feel compassionate, supposed to feel empathy. And I could pretend, but the truth is like my heart actually feels like armored and numb, because it's like almost too much to bear, too much to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, like there's nothing I can do. Like being in that room, I can't like will my heart to open. All I can really do is like breathe and notice that. Um, and know like the truth is like to numb out. Even though I don't like feel in control in that moment, like I know that like not knowing is a white privilege. Like numbing out and not feeling is a white privilege. Like white people, like we're taught that I don't know is an appropriate answer, in these conversations. Um,
I can see that. I mean, there's a way that like, I mean, one of the issues I see with being like an intelligent Black person who's got connections and supposed to move forward, and like the shame in my mom's eyes that I don't have like a good city job or something like that, is that I think the lesson we're supposed to take from society is that we should get better at that skill. We should get better at seeing the world as like a zero-sum sort of game theoried thing where if we deny ourselves enough, we can finally reach the high heights of white people. And I think that there's a way that many of the Black people I know who are smart and who are successful have internalized that and have taken themselves away from like some of these dudes are doing really well and they still have fun and stuff, but there's a little piece of affinity that I see go away. And I've had to claw mine back and get mine back slowly. And so I guess to some extent I can identify with you in that place. And I have a little bit more rawness because I live with more stuff, that I have to respond to some extent. But I can definitely see how that's a lesson that many people would say Black people should learn if they want, to be respected, or if they want a piece of the pie.
and the lesson is what? Like if you could give it a lesson title, what would it be?
It would be self-control, a master's journey.
Yeah, because to me that sounds like deny what you really feel, stuff it down and play someone else's game.
Yeah. But that's my thing. Like, I don't feel like that's working out for anybody, again, like we're about to elect Trump, I feel like. And that's not a thing you do if things are working out in your life. Like a clearly megalomaniacal person who clearly should not be given nuclear codes. You would do that just to poke people in the eye. Like that's what you do after you've been hungry and angry and scared for so long.
Yeah. So tell me this. I can hear that this is real for you.
Yeah.
Like you're figuring this out now. So what are you learning right now about how to be successful as a Black man? Like honoring that you're a Black man and because I know you're growing a business.
Yeah.
Right. That this matters. Like this is real for you.
Yeah.
What are you learning?
For me, what I'm learning is actually that is that the opposite is true. Is that sort of the more I'm emotional, the better I am at my job day to day, because I can actually be in line with really stupid stuff like when I have the highest energy, what I'm actually likely to fall down on, I need help with, how to ask for help in a way that people want to help me. Like all that stuff starts to happen it doesn't need a script anymore, which means I can use whatever bandwidth I was going to use for the script to actually do something else to grow my business. And then I also I just stopped doing things that don't matter to me. You know, there's so many little things that I thought would grow my business that aren't really that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to speak universally, not just for someone who has a coaching business, because that's a very specific job.
Yeah.
But there's a way that, I mean, because like there's no getting around the fact that you are going to have to spend a lot of time doing paperwork and taxes and that kind of crap. You just will, you know?
Yeah.
But there's a way that you can or that I've been learning to feel good about the stuff that I do because it actually is fully about what I'm creating. And if I can't feel that, like in my body, if I can't feel that as like a moral thing to do, like the right thing to do, like for me and those I care about, that's not like embodied in me. I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to do it in such a way that I make it look as fucked up as I feel, you know, even if it's
self-sabotaging in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Or rather, even if it's perfect and I make it perfect so that like it does everything it's supposed to and it makes me money and everything, it will just can keep me sad rather than make me happier and make me look forward to the next thing.
Yeah. I was listening to a business podcast the other day, and there's this line, like, if you become someone else to be successful, you can't enjoy that success as yourself. The person you've invented is the one who enjoys the success, and you can't actually feel it.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing for me. So I want to like name, what's the difference, do you think, between you being a Black entrepreneur and me being a white entrepreneur?
Well, tell me what you think it is. I'm not trying to dodge the question.
Yeah. Well, I just know some statistics as well. So I'll just start with, like, I know it's harder as a Black man for you to get loans.
Mm-hmm.
You likely don't have the same network I do, access to powerful people, access to money. Mm-hmm. I'm half Jewish. There's something called Hebrew free loans, where if you're Jewish, you can get a free loan pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Black free loans, so far as I've heard.
Yeah.
What else around? Just also like family, like lessons you've learned from your family, lessons I've learned from mine, like about money.
Yeah.
I have different demons from you, and I know it shows up differently in business.
For sure.
And it's not my job to air your demons on live video stream, but we've talked as friends, and I know it, right?
Yeah.
So for me, actually being successful in business has never been a problem. Like, I actually left a very successful corporate career. Mm-hmm. Like, for me, the struggle has been fulfillment. Like, how do I actually enjoy it?
Yeah.
Like, how do I actually feel myself in it?
Yeah.
Like, that's been my journey.
Well, I would say personally, there's a couple things. So I would say, yes, like all the things that you spoke about, like I know to be true as well. And I've read stats and I'm not saying that all that stuff is true. The one thing that came up was when you mentioned the Hebrew free loans, that's the other narrative, right? But any failure we have is all our fault. Like there aren't Black free loans because we don't have the foresight to take care of our own. It's like a really common piece of like knowledge that's considered unassailable. Like it's one of those bits of knowledge. It's like, well, if you didn't win, then you lost. And it's just that, that's simple. So that's one of the things that I think that some Black people who I know internalize. And I think that if you, as an entrepreneur, like that's a really hard thing to have on your back as you're trying to get started. The idea that like, not just that you aren't good enough, but like there's nobody who's going to understand you and support you. Yeah. Because the other person that might understand you is maybe looking for the same spot that you have, because the perception is that there's only a couple, of places in line. Mm-hmm. But to make it more personal, I would just say that, like, first of all, like at this point, I pretty much feel like I'm unemployable. I just feel like my lack of interest in having like a 9-to-5 job is really steep. it's a defining thing in my life, and it's why I had to become an entrepreneur. And it was because emotionally, I don't like being told what to do is like an issue for me now because of years of it. And it's something I'm sure, listen, I have all the help I need to work through it and learn how to do it. But if you took Jamal today and put me in a corporate job, it wouldn't work out.
Yeah.
But I think that says something. So like, there's like for me, a base aversion to process, even though I consider myself to be that kind of thinker. And a lot of it started well before I knew that I'd want to do business, what business I'd want to do, or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's because schools felt like prison. School felt like places that where you could only not fail, and you were likely to. And the pressure from my family is intense, but it also was, I wish I could remember now. There's a particular way that you damage people, and it's when you give them consequences but no rules, Yeah. And there's a way that my family I'd grown up with conversations around money, and again, I don't blame my family at all. They lived in poverty, grew up in poverty, and so the conversations around money were such that it was manage your money, but there was no plan. There was nobody for me to look to that could give me real substantive advice about money. And if you didn't manage your money because you were at such a small, you had so little of it, if you made a very, very, very small mistake, or if there was a late fee, then it could ruin you for weeks or a month, So there's an aversion to certain things because of that, for me personally. I've heard of it in other people. And I would say that, so my journey as an entrepreneur and then there's also the entrepreneur of who I can actually serve. Like, who is my target audience? It's like, do I turn back and give all of my efforts as someone who wants to build a business that actually helps people? Do I just turn around and give them the people who already have everything? Because they're the people who can pay me.
Yeah.
And the answer has to be yes, because I have to make a certain amount of money, but the answer can't be entirely yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking had lunch with a Black friend yesterday, and he's dedicated his career to serving his community. Other African American men, women, and youth. And, we're talking about how to get him connected to the corporate world so he can retire.
Because,
right?
Yeah, that's not fair either.
Right? I could argue like, oh, that's not right. Like, why should you have to? Why is you're amazing. Like, he does amazing work. Like, why is it such that you need to go looking to serve, corporations right now? I don't know if it helps to argue with that, but that's that's the decision he's faced with.
Well, I would also look at it the other way and go, why is that? Why is it that like you have to choose service? Like, why can't I just make Pokemon Go? Like, why can't that be my thing?
Yeah.
Because, like, why can't I just make something that's fun? Or like invent the new sock garter. Like, why can't that be my thing? Because yes, and then again, so you get caught in this thing where like you have to give back or not, and that's difficult.
Yeah. I think I feel the next topic coming on. There's a question for like white people, like, what do you have to give up? And I'm exploring that myself. Like, what is it I have to give up? I've heard white people before, people who who say, oh, we have privilege, we need to embrace it. right? I remember I used to think that way. Like, you know, when the advantage is yours, take it, right? You're not going to help anyone by denying it. And I actually agree with that. I think that's step one, is acknowledge, maybe not embrace. Yeah, I guess embrace, acknowledge, be like, oh yes, this is my privilege. And here are the 78,000 ways it shows up. Right? Little things like, oh, I can walk around my neighborhood in my PJs and slippers, and it's safe and it doesn't reflect on all white people. Right? Little things. But then there's a place where it's like, okay, we actually do have to let something go. Like, and you know, Jamal, we were talking about my year-long program, and I want to create a year-long business program where diversity is at the core of it. Building a diverse group of participants. And it took me a while to get that that's not going to work if I am the white leader in charge. Right? Like that sounds like one more system that you have plenty of experience not serving you in your life. Right? And really that's what's needed. Like what's needed is for us to come together and create new ways of doing everything, doing education, doing healthcare, doing business. That's truly co-created as equals. You know, people of different genders, different races. So what I realized essentially is like my baby, you know, my program that I so badly wanted to control and be in charge of and be a huge moneymaker for me. I'm like, wow, this actually needs to be co-led.
Yeah.
You know, with people of color, because I want, it's about privilege, and specifically I want race to be a focus. I'm like, wow, I have to co-lead this with people of color. I'm going to be out of control. I'm not going to get my way all the time. I'm going to, you know, have to, it's really this process of giving something away. Like I really do feel like I'm giving this program away, and not out of charity, but I'm like, oh, this is actually the only way it's going to work. Like I'm carrying too much ego to fit through the door of my purpose right now.
And the only thing that's going to shave it off is like, are going to be these other people, right? Who disagree slightly, who you have a hard time communicating with, who you really can't necessarily understand like where they're coming from all the time. And like, that's the thing. I mean, I keep on coming back to this because I mean, I get bored with myself because I feel like I'm just saying the same trite thing every other Black person is saying, and nobody's getting good at the skill of admitting that we just fucking need each other.
Yeah.
And that like the way our society is currently manufactured for all of us is actually not really working out that well. And we could all stand a bar a little bit from the man next to us, you know, or a woman or a trans person, you know. And I mean, and again, I don't say that as a sop. I say that because we really need that, you know. And I know that I personally need it. I can say that without my girlfriend to like give me her perspective on things. I know I would have already failed. And I wouldn't have had half the clients that I've got.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. One of my friends, Michael, said that every community has its illnesses, and sometimes the medicine comes from another community. The medicine cannot be found in the community that's sick.
Yeah.
I remember that was wild. That was like this huge insight when he told me that.
Yeah.
And I know for me, like spending a little bit of time in Black spaces has healed parts of me, you know, in a way that I could never have known, never predicted.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, it's like I am in inquiry about how to get people to admit that they're sick and how to actually start to diagnose themselves.
Yeah.
And to be able to actually go into the doctor and say, I have a complaint that looks like this.
The thing is, we're not taught the cause and effect. Racism has literally made me sick. When I started doing diversity work, I was getting colds half the time. Like had a cold for 2 weeks and I was better for 2 weeks and got a cold for 2 weeks. And as soon as I started doing diversity work, that got better. There were a few things. Some of it was physical, but that was a big component. Mm-hmm. I did a weekend workshop around diversity, and I was pretty much sitting in like shame, guilt, and fear for half the weekend. Mm-hmm. It was not comfortable. But it burned through a lot of that. Like I didn't even know I had it, but it surfaced and it burned through. I slept better than I have in a while for the 2 weeks after.
Yeah.
I could fall asleep at night. I gotten used to it. I'd gotten used to being anxious and, spinning in my head before bed,
Yeah.
most nights. So some way as a white person, like, I think we're conditioned to be blind to the ways that spiritually, emotionally, physically even, like, racism makes us sick.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know there's a cause and effect relationship until we have the faith, the courage and the faith to go in there and explore for ourselves and then see these connections. It blows my mind how deep it is.
Yeah.
Like,
And
ask me 2 years ago, I'm like, oh, racism, no big deal. That doesn't really affect my life, right? Bullshit.
well, I can see it. And you would have rightfully said, everything's fine. I'm a nice guy. And that would have been true, right? But only as far as it goes.
Yeah.
And then is it easier for me or harder for me as the victim? Like,
Mm-hmm.
In some ways I can clearly identify the problem as long as I make it you. But then, like, what's happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I define myself?
Yeah. Mm. What is the problem if it's not me and my white people?
Well, to some extent it is. I mean, but like, if it's not, but really, like, the structural thing, like, the truth of it is that I grew up with all the advantages I could ever want, because I went to a fancy boarding school, and I have good friends who have access to everything that I could need. The problem is, at this point, that I just, like, I've been conditioned to be a certain way for so long that I can't always see how to get out of it. I know scarcity so well. I don't know how not to be scarce anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know avoidance so well that I don't know how not to avoid that bill when it comes in the door.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that's your work and your work alone.
Nobody else can.
Yeah.
Nobody else can.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, like, in a world we don't have a language for, a vocabulary for, or in a world where you admit that this thing had such a deep impact on it, and someone could, because I imagine someone so easily being like, oh, that's bullshit. That's just that's just some liberal, like, hippie hooey, and I guess my question continues to be, how do we help people understand that this stuff is real, even if their experience is different than yours?
I think white people, I'm trying to think when's the last time I felt this way, can see if we see a black person playing the victim card, right? So here's let me just, like, try to name the pieces we're talking about. I think it's like the victim card.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a victim because of you, because you're the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then getting stuck in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not very empowering for you to hold that stance.
Mm-hmm.
And as a white person, like, what I can get is, like, you're trying to say something. Like, there actually is historical context. Like, black people were actually brought to America to be slaves. That's really, that is our history.
Well, I would go.
Generational trauma is real. And often, like, as a white person, I'm not focused on or don't want to hear, like, the historical story of, like, how we got here.
Can I
Yeah.
And it's just that, like, the historical context is just so not long ago, and I think well, there's two things that are happening. The one is, if someone's whiny, like, that's just annoying, and there's actually nothing you can do for them, for their point of view and where they are in their head in that particular moment. No one can solve that for you, and so no one wants to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
The other part that's not understood, and I think that's there's a tension there, because there is a thing that black people are crying out for, which is that, like, when black people tried to get things, and this is unlike other minorities, they literally blew up Black Wall Street, like, relatively not that long ago. Redlining happened very recently, and and then again, like our school to prison system, where they literally are judges selling people into prison, that's all pretty recent, and it has a structural effect that has to be taken in, I feel for white people who are like, what am I supposed to do about your pain right now? But I also feel for Black people who are like, well, you can start by taking notice of me here. You can start by actually admitting that like this continues to happen.
Yeah. And believing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm learning right now, is how do I actually believe people of color when they tell their stories, instead of saying, yeah, but didn't you consider that,
That's really tough. I
and
mean,
I'm willing to believe and feel, because, Lee Moonhwa, who's, one of my teachers right now, teaching me about, racism and how to facilitate these sorts of conversations. He says, sometimes when the truth is too hard to bear, we make up another truth. And this is for everyone, but for white people especially, like, a lot of us were raised believing certain things about people of color, about our system, that we live in police are fair, police are just looking out for everyone's safety. Our government's fair, and there's some truth. There's some truth that's really hard to hear. So it's like, as white people, when we're hearing truth that doesn't match what we've been taught, how do we actually be open-minded, and at least at the very minimum believe that that is true for you, that is your true experience, and then more than that, like, that is a facet of the truth, right?
And also, like, why is that so hard to get to something's also happening within you that's making it hard for you to believe it. And also, I have a friend whose mom was wondering about how she could find more resources, to really research this issue. And our daughter, who knows me well, was just like, Google. And there's this place where there's learned helplessness on both sides. But white people pretended they couldn't possibly understand or take any responsibility for this. And Black people pretended there can be no story other than a story of their own oppression. And but in my mind, that still doesn't put us on equal footing, because there is still this historical and structural context that continues to this day that still has somebody's boot on my neck on some level.
Yeah. So, just looking at the time, let's start to wrap up.
Sure.
And we talked about, concluding with what can be done.
Yeah.
I think I'll speak to white people first. Hey, white people, because in many ways this is a white problem. There's a lot as white people we can do. So the first thing is, like, saying something, doing something, like, to be a bypasser, not a bypasser, what do you call it? Stander by, whatever. To just stand by the side as injustice is happening, and it happens everywhere. Like, that actually contributes to the problem. Right? I know I've had plenty of times I'm like, who am I to talk about race? Like, who gave me this certification or the authority to talk about this and to care about it? Because I'm not, some white people are in intimate relationship with people of color or come from a mixed race family. Like, I don't have any of that. I don't have any, like, reason to look at this. And there's been a lot of confusion for me. Like, why do I come to these workshops? Until I got a reflection from a Black woman who says, why don't you embrace it? Like, that's one of the most amazing reasons to talk about race, is because you don't have to. Like, it's only when people talk about it when they don't have to that we actually get to create change in certain ways. So one thing is just to talk about it, like to talk with other white people. I'm setting up a call with some friends, all white privileged friends to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't have to wait till a person of color raises it to talk about what it's like for us to be white,
Mm-hmm.
and the pain of it and what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, shit, like the other day, I was at the Claremont Hotel. My grandparents were visiting.
Mm-hmm.
Jamal, do you know the Claremont?
Me too.
Yeah, in Berkeley, and I was sitting by the pool with my parents, my grandparents, and uh, and just looking out, and it's 90% white. And I just got out of a weekend of unlearning racism, and it went from like I've been there before, and it's been uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but it felt to me flat out disturbing
Mm-hmm.
to see this is a continuation of a legacy of country clubs that are originally were exclusively white, but then are sort of like white by default.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it's why is it all white? It's because it's economic. They charge I don't know how much to be a member, but a lot. And anyway, I was flat out disturbed by it, and I just went downstairs to the membership director's office and said, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes to talk? Can I talk to you?" And I asked him. I said, "Hey, I was up there, noticed that the place is all white, 90% white. I'm wondering what is your what are you doing for diversity and inclusion?"
Mm-hmm.
And had a very raw 10-minute conversation with him. He was not happy. He hung in there. He was taken by surprise, and then he ends up saying, and I was just talking with him and said, I talked about some historical context and said, as a white man, it's disturbing for me, and we got to do something. And then at the end, I said, like, how did this conversation impact you? Did it shift anything for you at all? I said, be honest with me. He said, you caught me on a bad day. One of our members, died earlier today. I was just talking with them. Like, yeah. And he said, I'm really sorry for your loss. I'm sorry to hear it. And like, there's never a good time to bring this up. I've reflected on it a lot. I could have scheduled a meeting, but I don't know if they'd even given me a meeting. And I was like, fuck you. Like, why is is it never the right time and place to have a hard conversation about race?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And why again, like, why is a matter of another person's humanity an inconvenience to you?
yeah. Well, he felt threatened.
Yeah.
And he covered his ass. He didn't acknowledge anything I was saying. He said, if you come back on another day, you'll see a different mix of people. Bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there on other days. Because our tennis program has won a diversity award. Great. It's good to hear. But I didn't ask about the tennis program. I asked about the general membership.
About the amount of black and brown, bodies lounging around your pool.
Yeah. That's not, I wasn't, there's a way in which like, and I don't know how I'd feel if someone confronted me about my business, in some way like this. Right. But I hope I'd show up and say, thank you for bringing it up. Wow, that's really uncomfortable to hear. And I'd love to talk with you about it and see if there's anything I can do. Like, that's what white people need to do is like, we need to get over our defensiveness and actually hear the message and have it for a second, not be about like, am I a good person? Like, am I perfect? Like, am I doing it right? And listen for what the communication's asking for. Right? Like, he had an opportunity I gave him my email. He could have emailed me and be like, look, I care about this too. Let's have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's tons of ways he could have taken it. And as a white person, he was in a hard position because he was in a role.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I don't really know how he felt personally. My guess is like, he felt quite constrained as the membership director of, a Fairmont hotel chain hotel.
Mm-hmm.
He was covering his ass.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand that. And like, we need to have uncomfortable conversations and put stuff on the line. I mean, that's really how I feel about it.
Well, that's what I would say, like, to answer the question of what somebody's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that manager, like, as a black person who's kind of used to this going poorly for me, like, I don't know that manager would or even necessarily should do directly, like in that day, do anything to address you in particular. The thing that I know that people can do, because I know that it's made a change in my own life in looking at feminism. I know that the white friends I have who have gone from fragility to being fairly robust in the subject is like start looking at it from the point of view as what is it like, what is being white for me? You know, has it worked out? You know, like, okay, I only see white people around this pool. What's awesome about that? What's not awesome about that? You know, what does that say about me? Like, ask, so rather than make it this, like, don't make it about social justice, because that's notional, you know? Literally make it so that what aren't you getting in your life? Like, if I go and I judge a city, you know, a city I might want to move to, I judge it by its diversity and by how many things rub against each other. I don't want to live in Abu Dhabi because nothing rubs against each other there, you know, or if it does, it happens like in a basement. You know, I want to live in the San Francisco's or, well, maybe not anymore, but the San Francisco's, the New Yorks of the world, the Berlins of the world, because different things happen, because it adds something to my life. Yeah. And if I'm scared of that, if I'm constrained there, if I can't deal with that there, if I jump into my logic without actually knowing I don't really have all the facts, that means that there's something that I'm protecting myself from. What is that?
Right.
If you ask yourself those kind of questions, I feel like you don't have to solve racism. You just have to like it's going to have you voting better. It's going to have you be nicer to your fellow man. It's going to have you actually look at things from their point of view, because you will know, because you will desire it for yourself.
So Jamal, I agree. And I think the hard thing as a white man, when you say that, is like, I don't know what I'm missing. Like I've only been able, here's for me, even like the whole way, I have a sense that there's more that's possible.
Yeah.
For my life.
Yeah.
But I can't picture it clearly. I just have some, you know, my intuition is like, there's something here. And I can look back and see, oh, my life has gotten so much better as I've gotten over some of this, you know, fear, shame, and guilt.
Yeah.
But like, as a white person, I don't have much to go on. I don't know. Like, I can't know. It is literally the faith that there is more possible and that my life will be better the more diverse and rich it is, the more diverse my friends are, the more diverse my communities are. Have you seen The Giver?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. It's on Netflix. Everyone's got to watch it. It's about this, like, it's about essentially this, like, utopian community that's all the same.
Yeah.
Everyone's white. No one really has feelings. Everyone's dumb. And in that community, when you're in that, you don't know there's anything different. You know, and essentially about, you know, this kid who wakes up, you know, and his quest. I won't give away any of the movie, whatever.
I get it.
But it's, when you're in it, it's really impossible. Like, you actually have to trust. And it is,
I wouldn't say
it is moving on faith.
Yeah. I got someone at the door randomly. Do you want to pause it for a second, or what should we do?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We're back.
Yeah. So The Giver.
Yeah.
So, I think that so like, to answer your question, like, what is it that, like, if you don't know what you don't know, how can you start to?
Yeah.
This is going to get back into a little bit more of the hippie stuff, but I think you have a sense of it. I think we all do. I think it's why we cover other cultures or things that are interesting. You know, I was obsessed. I pretty much thought I was going to be Japanese when I was little, obsessed with ninjas and that kind of thing. And I think that there are different things in different cultures that we might want access to. And I think that if we can start at the thing that another culture has that we don't, that you don't feel you have in your life, and there's a way to do this without cultural appropriation or fetishization, by the way. If you can start there, then that's a place where you start your inquiry. Like, you'll never, like, no one can tell you how to learn all of it immediately, you know? But I know that if you get comfortable having a conversation with yourself, you just will only get more comfortable. And especially if you start with a conversation by yourself and then you want to challenge yourself incrementally out in the world. If you're willing to do that, things will change. I mean, I can tell you, because I grew up in an all black culture and went to the whitest boarding school ever, you know, and I adapted there. And then I've lived in other countries and I adapted there. Like nobody, like, white people and people who can't do it, like, you can't tell me that's true. You know, you are constrained by your privilege, by that other kind of stuff. I can see that, but I don't buy that it's impossible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm with you.
That's the deal.
All right, Jamal, any last thoughts, last words to?
No, just thank you. Thank you for being with me and giving me a platform here. And thank you for your own like honesty and your continued self-reflection.
Mm.
And I just know that we need each other.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you showing up and the risks you took. Yeah, I'm really aware right now that neither of us are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in all this, we have our blind spots. There's stuff we've missed. You know, I'm sure we could each be criticized for half a dozen things we said in this call.
And rightfully.
And rightfully. And feel free to comment and let us know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and I'll say, you know, we were going to talk about white fragility, but part of it is, you know, part of this work is being willing to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes our intentions are good and pure, and our impact is not so positive. But I appreciate you and both of us for showing up and having a conversation and putting it on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, hope it has a ripple effect.
Let's see.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.